and her husband are very, very dear friends of Mike and I. We met them about 7 or 8 years ago at Bet Coon. And at that time, during our prayer services there, we read a chapter out of the New Testament each week. And when I started talking to Laura, our guest speaker is Laura Ross, when we started talking to her and hearing about her ministry, those scriptures came to life. Hearing about people that have nothing and that their heart's desire is to serve the Creator first and then to serve each other. So Laura's going to share with us today. Her ministry is Armor of Hope, and it's ministry in Honduras. And she's going to share with us today. So please welcome our good friend. And Mike and I did have the opportunity to go. Mike and I did have the opportunity to go to Honduras, to the people, our friends in Honduras. So, Laura. Good morning, church.
Good morning.
We'll use a chair. I'm a little achy this morning. It's certainly a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you. Okay. We're getting set up. Tell me what I need to push here. Okay, this goes forward. Oh, we're going. Here I am. All right. I'm going to get technology all under wraps here and try to take care of things.
I can push them back here at the same time.
As Stephanie said, my name is Laura Ross and I work in Honduras. And Joe, here's your V8. It's a private joke between Joe and I. You know what that means. I got started about 20 years ago working in Honduras. And it started as something as simple as being asked to be a chaperone on a mission trip for some teens. And that was the beginning of a very long story. And it's so long, we won't tell it all today. We're going to tell a little bit. The way we do ministry is we want people to see what living for Christ, living for God, what that looks like day to day. So you won't see us out on the street corner, you won't see us knocking on doors or passing out pamphlets or anything like that. What we do is we bring people who don't believe in God, who don't have faith, and we hire them. And we bring them in to work with us. And we show them what life looks like from day to day. And that is where we begin with the people we minister to. We are more of development work, which means we kind of are in there for the long term. We want to see people change. We want to see villages change. We do some relief work. It is a third world country. They speak Spanish there. And so I'm the only English speaker there when I'm working in the villages. So it's nice to be among English speakers this morning. I just got back a few days ago. And so being back to my home language is always comforting and nice. There they're having drought. In fact, so much we had wildfires the whole time I was there. And then I came back to Ohio. Enough said. Mike and Stephanie were down with us. They were great workers down there. The people still send greetings to them every time I come back. Make sure you tell Mike and Stephanie we said hi. And so they got a real glimpse into the work that we're doing. Linda is working with our health committee, and Vic is back there hiding. He's working with our education committee, and we're just trying to constantly improve what we're doing to reach people for Yeshua. What I'd like to do today is tell you some stories. Okay, I'm not hitting that button right or something, Danny, because I'm hitting the arrow and it's not moving.
Oh,
do I need to be doing something else here?
I'll get this one.
Okay. Bienvenidos a Honduras. That's just welcome to Honduras. Honduras, as this is a third world country, it's in Central America, and right now Honduras is in the midst of chaos. They are just right on the verge of probably a civil war. They've now got the national police fighting against the military, and things are a mess. Up in the village, we wouldn't even know that's happening. But we do have to take precautions when we leave the village to go down to the cities. I'm real proud of my brothers and sisters there. They have been so brave through all of this, and they have not let all the fear that is happening all around them bring them down. In fact, the congregation there is growing, and it's just an incredible sight to see people with this level of courage. Oh, there we go. So what I want to do today,
there.
oh, now we're going
There you
somewhere
go.
else.
That was.
Okay, that's where I want to start.
Oh, all right.
I want to tell you some stories today because I think it's the best way to illustrate how we do ministry. We try to live it. And this young man here, his name is Yul. And for you who have a little more age, it's Yul Brynner. And that name came from the movie. Yes, his father was in the military and loved Yul Brynner movies and came home and named his son that. So this is Yul. It's the very first time I ever saw him. I took a picture of him, and he was sitting down in a bathroom. We were refurbishing an old clinic, and he came to volunteer, and at midday I came to meet all the new workers, and there he was. And I'll tell you, he was one of the most miserable looking human beings I had ever seen. And I introduced myself to him, and he kind of grumbled out his name. And that was about the end of our first meeting. He just didn't want to talk. He was just doing his thing and kind of had that leave me alone sort of expression, and so I did. What I did come to find out is that Yul was an alcoholic. He was a drug user. He was a womanizer. And he had a really bad reputation in the village. And that made me want to reach him just all the more. Well, when we had volunteers that were working with us come and start with us, we always invited them to lunch. And we invited Yul with the rest of them, and he wouldn't come. He wanted nothing to do with us. And I just kept going, and he wouldn't come. And one day I saw him waiting at the gate, way over on the other side of the schoolyard. I was living in a classroom in a school at that time. And I asked the other workers, was he come to eat or not? And they said, nah, he'll just wait for us out there. I said, no, he won't. That's enough of this. And I walked over to the door and I yelled, hey, Yul, we're waiting to eat. Come on. And I just walked away from the door. I didn't even give him a chance to answer. I figured I'd put a little pressure on him. And sure enough, he came in. And we got to start talking a little bit. And after some time, I asked him, Yul, why did you come and volunteer to work with us? And he said, well, I just live a really bad life, and I don't like my life. And I saw something different with the people that came here. It's like, y'all are happy. I see how you live every day. I see how you work. You have a quality of work, you have a work ethic, but you love each other. He said, this might surprise you, but I've been praying. He said, I don't really know how to pray, but I've just been asking God for a long time to help me change, and I don't know how to do that. But I've been asking him for it for some time now. And when I saw y'all, I thought, maybe this is how I'm going to change. And so I came and volunteered to work with you. And that was 13 years ago. So I'm going to have to make a very long story short here. We're going to zoom forward 13 years now. Because Yul now is a minister. He's the general manager to the mission work. And I want to talk a little bit more about that later. We're going to come back to Yul. But I just want to give you an idea of where we're going to go this morning with some of these stories. This is Maria. She's 12 years old. I first saw her a few months ago, and she weighed 25 pounds, severely malnourished, and she has some other problems, cerebral palsy among those. And I think you'll see as we go into her story a little later how we do ministry, because this is a really good example that's happening now. This is something that's happening now, in fact, today. And I'll get to what's happening today with her family that we're very excited about. And this is Marisol and her little daughter, Catherine. This was 13 years ago. Marisol was a prostitute. And she was a prostitute because she couldn't find work and had no way to support her daughter. And this is common in a third world village where the unemployment right now is 70%. It's one of the reasons you're seeing so many people coming from Honduras. They're in a desperate situation, and some people aren't, I mean, they're literally not eating. They're barely surviving in some cases. And in some cases, like Marisol, they do things out of desperation that they're not proud of. This is Hoche. His real name is Jose, but we all call him Hoche. And in this picture, he was 12. He was one of the very first children to come and greet me when I moved in. Now, when I moved into the village, I couldn't speak any Spanish, and I didn't have a translator. And I figured it's sink or swim. I'm going to learn this language one way or another. So I just moved into the village and carried a Spanish-English dictionary around with me for a couple years until I could muddle out a few sentences. But he was one of the kids that taught me a lot of words. And he'd come and hang out, and we'd play, and he'd help us work. He'd do whatever he needed. And we're going to come back to his story as well. Well, I'm missing a photo somewhere, something out of order. Well, we'll just come back to it then.
I can pull it up.
Anyways, I think, did we miss some things?
I can pull it up.
Okay. We've got a boy with a red cap. You can see him. It's all right, Danny. I can go with this. That's fine. So the boy in the middle, his name's Brian. He's 14 in this picture. And the local schools, well, to say the very least, when they graduate from high school there, they don't even know times tables, they can't multiply, they can't divide. It's really sad. They really have no future when you go to a public school in a village, at a village level. And Brian was kicked out of public school at the village level. The teachers said he was too dumb to learn. And so they kicked him out of school. Oh, we're still going to do one more. Okay, so if you look over, I guess it's to your left. Okay, you'll see up in the upper corner there's a woman there. Her name is Carmen. And she lived way, way up in the mountains with her husband. And we found out about Carmen. This was her house there. We found out about Carmen and her husband from some people who found out her husband was dying. And they literally, I mean, it's a straight up the mountain walk for 4 hours to get to them. And they lived by themselves. They were from a tribe of Indians called Sikake, and their tribal custom is when you get married, you go off and you live by yourself till you die. Well, her husband was dying. Her hands were all crippled up with arthritis. She couldn't cook anymore. She was just going out and gathering any food she could from the jungle. And she sent word down the hill that her husband was dying, and she was afraid he was going to die, and she would be left with his body and wouldn't be able to take care of him. And so that's how we met Carmen. So now we're going to go back to Yul. And we're going to tell you a story, a little bit more about his story. Because Yul was a little bit different than so many people, and especially men that we see in the village. Men are not interested in faith in the village. It's a really hard thing, but he was different. He was very interested in faith. He was very interested in changing. And the first thing he asked me when he finally admitted to me that he wanted to change, and I asked him, well, would you like to learn a little bit more about God, about His Word? He goes, yeah, but I have a question first. I said, okay. He goes, I heard a story when I was a little boy. And I've always wondered if it's true. He said, I heard that there was a prophet of God and that he never died, that a chariot of fire came down and picked him up and took him to heaven. I've always wanted to know if that was true. And I said, yes, it is. And I turned over to Kings and I read him the story. And he was amazed. He goes, well, if that kind of stuff is in there, that's what I want to learn about. And so, you start where they're at, and that's where we started. And he began learning. Now, he couldn't read. I had to read to him when I first met him. He couldn't write his name. He didn't even know how old he was. He had an ID, and I said, give me your ID. I said, you're 28 years old. Wow. Happy birthday to you. His birthday was actually going to be the next day. And I taught him how to write his name, and we just kind of started with some things like that. And then he wanted to learn how to read, and we used the scriptures to teach him how to read. And then before long, I got tired of driving. I was the only person in the village that drove. I said, you want to learn how to drive? So taught him how to drive. And before long, he just kept going. brought a guy that taught him how to weld. Today, Yul can build a house from laying the foundation, taking the measurements for the foundation, till handing the person the keys, the electrical, the plumbing, the roofing, windows, doors, everything. And he's teaching that to others. And these were people that came down with us that had special skills, and God's always provided who we've needed. And they've taught him these things. And now he's teaching those things to other people, and he's using those skills to help people that can't help themselves. But he's also, every Sunday, every Saturday, they meet on Sabbath. This is a Messianic congregation, probably the only one in Honduras. I don't know if there's another one, never heard of another one. But they meet on the Sabbath, and then they do their classes on Sunday. So they have a special kind of service on Sabbath, and I'll talk about that in a little while, because it's very interesting how they have looked at Scripture and gone with it. So he literally runs things now when I'm gone. He takes care of our diabetes program. He's learned how to check blood sugars and administer dosages of medications. I mean, an incredible young man. If you ever come to Honduras, you'll meet him, because he's all over the place. Very highly respected now. He gave up everything he was involved with, and he's so highly respected. He's been asked several times to be the village president, but he turns it down. He says, no, the work I'm doing with Armor Pope is more important. So instead, they invite him to all the village leader meetings so that he can give his opinion on things. So that he's gone from being an alcoholic, womanizer, drug addict, to being one of the most highly respected men in the village, because he saw a reflection of God. We're going to talk a little bit again about Maria. Like I said, she weighed 25 pounds. We met her. And you can see her here about 3 months later. I was just down there, just got back on Sunday, like I said, and here she's back up to a normal weight. She's happy. When we first met her, she had no expression on her face. She just kind of stared off into space. And now she interacts with us and laughs, and just like a totally different child. And so what we did with Maria, she was first brought to our attention by someone that lived in her community. And we don't generally serve her community. It's a little bit further away. But her case was so severe, we decided to step in. And when we brought her to the clinic and had her evaluated and started her on a feeding program. Well, one of the things we like to do is get to know the family and use anything that we do, and in this case, feeding a little girl, to try to introduce Yeshua to the family. And so in this case, we went to her home to visit, and that you can kind of see a little bit of her home in the background. It's just a clay and stick home, is all it was, dirt floor. In fact, the dirt wasn't even level. It was just stones. Very bad. They had no beds. They were just sleeping on whatever stuff piled on the floor, and there's 7 living in that house. So it was a very bad situation, no electric. The nearest water was about a half mile away, walking downhill with the empty thing, empty container. So, walking back uphill was rough. Daddy worked out in the fields, and so it was Mom carrying the daughter, carrying the water with the other little kids. Very, very difficult life, something we cannot even begin to comprehend here. Very difficult. She's doing great. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about her in just a minute. In fact, this is her family. Well, we'll go ahead and talk about it now. So I told you today something special was happening. And I'll show you, I can go forward and back up, right? Let's try
Yes.
Let's see if we can do this. Okay, go forward. Okay. Oh, no, we went forward too far. Back. Okay. So the home over here I gotta get this straight. Over here on your right was their home, and it was just made up of whatever they could put together. And so I was sharing this with a friend in Alabama. He goes, he's a minister down there at one of the churches that support us. He goes, we'll build him a house, because they got to be able to move that wheelchair around. And Mama's got to have some relief from all the difficult days that she has taking care of this child. So they came down and they built a house. Really godly group of men. Well, during that week, we'll go back now. Here's the owner. His name is Adelino. During that week, he saw something different, and he told me about it. He pulled me off to the side one day, and he said, there's something really different about this group of men. I said, well, in what way? He goes, they are hard workers. They don't even speak Spanish, and yet they communicate with us. He said, it's been amazing to watch them. They're joyful. They come, and he said they actually sing sometimes when they're working. They just break out in song. I said, well, that's what God does. He just affects us that way. We can't help it. He said, I'm seeing something. I'm just seeing something really different. This has really felt good to see all this happening. He didn't say much more than that. Well, they finished the work 2 days later, and everyone was saying their goodbyes, and he pulled me to the side, and he said, I want to know this God. I want to know him. He said, I want the life they have. And this is what I'm talking about. We introduce Yeshua to people by them watching our life. And I always tell my workers, if no one's asking for what you have, then you're not living right. And in this case, he was asking for what they had. So today, Yul is meeting with Abelino and his wife, Elsa, and they are for the first time opening God's Word together. So we need to give prayer about this. It's amazing. And so this all started with a little girl. Now, one more little part of this story. Abelino asked the night before the group was leaving, he said, would you all come to my home and dedicate my home to God? And so the group came. He invited all his neighbors, and they all came inside the house, and we sang praises in Spanish and in English and dedicated his home to God. And so he followed through with that desire now in wanting to dedicate his life and his family's life to God. So very exciting time for this family. And this is Carmen, who lived up on the hill, and this is her now. We have a place called the Casa De Casa. The Casa De Casa came out of the need to teach the village how to take care of elderly. In the village, if you have no family and you are ill, or if you're dying even, what they used to do is take you to the center of the village. We have a little community center, and they would lay you there and just keep walking by until you finally died. They didn't know what to do with you. And then they'd go bury you. Well, the first time I saw that happening was with a man named Emilio. He had a stroke, and I said, oh no, this is not happening on my watch. And even my workers, this is what they grew up seeing. So they were like, well, what are you going to do? And so we took care of the man. He had a stroke, and this house then came out of being because we weren't going to watch that happen again. And when the village, we try not to change culture, but there's times things have to change. And this was something that needed to be changed. Well, in the village, when they saw us caring for this man, and they saw us making plans to build a home to start caring for people, they all started pitching in. What do you need? Well, we need rocks for the foundation. They were digging rocks out of the yard. And then the men were coming, I'm here to help. Just tell me what to do. Mix concrete. And before long, we had, women coming and cooking food and dropping off and donations coming. And we're still getting donations. We got a donation of 20 chicks last time I was there. Because we're raising chickens there. So one of the things they wanted was fresh eggs. They were all used to eating fresh chicken and fresh eggs. I said, well, let's buy some chickens. And we built them a chicken pen with some chickens. And so this is where Carmen is living now. Now, you need to understand that where she lived, the only water source she had was a puddle up her yard. It was coming up, I guess, from some kind of really, poor producing spring, because all it produced was a puddle of brown, muddy water. And she would scoop up, and that's what they drank. Well, we went up to repair that house that she's in. That was the first thing we did. We said, this thing's going to fall down, because her husband said, no, I'm going to die up here. No, I'm not going down. We're going to bring them down to this house here if they wanted to. And he said, no, we'll die up here. So we said, let's fix your house at least. So this, like I said, this house, there's no roads or anything to it. We ended up having to put some materials on the backs of mules, and the men had to hike up, and they constructed a very simple home of materials that were at least where she was safer. And while they were there, Yul, when they came back down, Yul said, so she wanted to make us coffee. And she had one cup. She owned one cup. So she'd walk over to that puddle, and she scooped that water up, and then she'd put the coffee in it, and then boil it, and then strain it, and then put it back in the cup. And then he was the first one that she handed it to. And he said, Laura, all I could remember was you told me, if it's boiled, it's safe to drink. And I remembered that it boiled. So I just kind of closed my eyes and drank it down and handed her back the cup. And she went and scooped up another puddle of water and made that cup for the next person. And what a servant heart she has. She's an amazing lady. Well, anyways, her husband did, like I said, end up getting so bad he was unconscious. And she was very scared. And her nearest neighbor is about a mile away. And they were just checking on her every now and then. And she told him, I don't know what to do. He's gonna die. So that's when we did get word, and we went up and we brought him down. And we brought him down in hammocks stretched across tree branches. I don't know how the men did it. I made that hike one time. It almost killed me. I don't know how. It's just all rocks straight up and all rocks straight down. And how they carried these two people out is amazing to me, but they did. So anyways, back in November I was there, and I'm going to show you a picture of her husband here. We asked Roberto, this is Roberto, we said, Roberto, how old are you? I think I'm about 200 years old. He doesn't know, he's never had an ID. But we did have to take him to the doctor when he was so bad. He's alive now, he's doing well. And the doctor, from what the doctor can tell physically and from things he remembers in history, he thinks he's at least 105 years old. Oh, wow. So, and then his wife, Carmen, is right around 100. About 2 years ago, Carmen came to us and said, I want to be baptized. And she was about 100 then. She too doesn't have an ID, so we don't know exactly how old she is, but that's about where she is. So they're living there, and then back in November, I came down, and I always go and visit on the weekends there and sit with our elderly. And she grabbed me by the hand. She goes, Roberto and I want to talk to you. And she dragged me back into their bedroom, and they sat me down on one bed, and she sat on the other, and he did. And she goes, we never imagined life could be so good. We never imagined a day when we would drink clean water every day. We never imagined a day when we would actually have food every day. In fact, I haven't had tortillas in so long because my hands are so crippled up with arthritis. I never thought I was even going to eat another tortilla for the rest of my life. She said, we are so blessed. We're overjoyed. And Roberta, she talks for him, by the way. He can talk. He's just kind of ornery. He'll just say, you tell her. And that's what he did. He said, you tell her. And she said, Roberta wants me to tell you thank you, because had you not forced him to come down here, he'd be dead. And he is loving life right now. So, just awesome couple. I love them today. This is the Casa De Casa where they live. There's 5 rooms, and then there's a common living area and a kitchen. And it's fashioned after village living. We wanted them to feel like it's a home. So it's not a nursing home. They can come and go as they please. We give them as much liberty as they want. We just kind of make sure they're taking medications that they need to take care of their health. But we try to just make it family. And the church, you'll see the church building is actually on the same property, so they're loved on all the time. Our workers all started out the same way as Yul. They were all non-Christians. Every one of them now are Christians, and they treat these people like gold. It's amazing. Went too far. All right, this is Brian, a 14-year-old that got kicked out of school. Now, when you get kicked out of school there, that means you're going to be living on the street. And we just didn't want to see that with Brian. He was a nice kid. He was also one of the kids that came to visit me the very first day with Hoche. And when he got kicked out, we went to his parents and said, can you come and work with us? And they said, yeah. Okay, so we brought him to work with us, and we just brought him to come and take care of the yard. We weren't really sure what we were going to do with him yet. It was just bring him on. So he came for his first paycheck, and I said, okay, you got to sign your name here, and you got to count your money. He goes, well, I don't know how to count. I said, well, I'll count it for you. I said, now sign your name. I don't know how to sign my name. Well, I'm going to sign your name for you, but it's the last time. And I took a piece of paper and I wrote his name out. I said, that's how you write your name. Write it by next Friday so you can get your paycheck. Well, he came in next Friday and he wrote his name. Well, I knew this kid is not dumb. This kid knows exactly what he wants and what he doesn't want. And he didn't want to sit in school. To make a long story short, again, he's learned how to build a house from scratch too. And he's learned how to weld, put windows in. He can do the whole thing, all the way to handing an owner a key. In Honduras, you don't go in the military to learn a skill. You cannot get into the military unless you have a skill. And a lot of young men want the military because it's a way to make some money. And so because of the skills that he gained with us, he was able to enter the military, which was a dream of his. When he was 18, he sat Yul and I down and said, I got something to tell y'all. I said, okay. He goes, I decided to sign up for the military. Yul and I just started crying. We just had the same reaction. We didn't realize we'd started feeling like mommy and daddy to this boy. But anyways, he did enter the military. And this picture of him holding Feliz Año Nuevo, which means Happy New Year, he sent to me through Facebook around New Year's this year. And so I posted that up there. But what I really wanted to show you was this. He's building his own home now. We teach all our workers how to save money. No matter how little money you have, we teach them how to save money and spend wisely. And so the whole time he's been in the military, he's been sending money home to have his own house constructed. And when he's off on leave, he comes and he works on it. So, he's going to leave the military at 22 years old with his home built. And so, we're real proud of Brian, and I'm in contact with him all the time, and he's saying, I'm going to come and volunteer with you when I get back. I'm going to be working for you still. I'm going to volunteer. I'm okay. I'm waiting. And this is Marisol. Like I said earlier, she practiced prostitution as a way to support her baby. This is the very first time I met her. And this was just on a survey trip, actually. And so I didn't really get to know her at that time. But when we decided to work in this village, I got to know her. By then, she had 3 babies. And she was very shame-based. You couldn't get her to talk to you. You couldn't get her to look at you. If you talked to her, she dropped her head. And so we brought her on to work with us. We wanted to give her another way to make money. And she's dropped prostitution completely. But it's taken a long time to get her to a point that she's not shame-based. But in about the last 12 months, she'll finally talk, she'll smile, she'll interact, and you see this self-confidence starting to come back. And just recently, she has started attending the services of the church. We don't push anybody. We just kind of keep loving on them. And that's what I tell our staff. You just love people till they can't resist it anymore. And that's where we're going with Marisol. We're just loving her till she can't resist it. Now she comes. We have an education center. Let's see if I can flip this here. Okay, I'm stuck, Damon. Oh, I know we went way far. Okay. You gotta love technology. Okay, so it's our education center. We built this because of the situation with the schools that I talked to you about earlier. It is not a school. It's to come alongside the school and alongside parents to give them a place to really help lift up their kids' education. This is where I find Marisol all the time. She loves coming here. She comes almost every day. She comes and works in the morning, and then she comes back in the afternoon to just sit and read books, and she brings her kids with her, and she reads to them, and she teaches them. She wants something better for them. And so this is, that whole thing of just trying to actually make a change, not just a temporary change, not just a handout, but change lives. And I'm seeing these kids now, and they're at church all the time, and they come up and what can I help you with? I'll tell you what, you clean my yard, clean that garbage out of my yard, I'll give you a few Lempira. Out there, clean the yard. Okay, we're done. Run up to the house, giving me a bunch of hugs. Now you can't resist that. They're sweet, sweet kids, but she's doing a good job of being a good mama, and she's cleaned up her life. Now we just got to keep praying for her that she'll take that final step. She's still working on that self-confidence, but we see it coming, and it's very, very encouraging. Here she's working with one of her daughters, teaching her how to use a calculator. It's actually just a little kid's register, but it's a calculator. So teaching her how to use it. Okay, this is Hoche. Now, not all of our stories are happy stories, and this is one that's not a happy story. Hoche was born out of wedlock. It was Yul's sister. She was 16 when she had him, and after she had him, she left. And Yul and his mother raised this boy. So this boy, by blood, is his nephew. By heart, is his child. Well, 2 years ago, and I've watched this one. He's the one I told you is the first one that came to visit me. So I watched him grow up over the next 10 years. But 2 years ago, he was murdered. And violence is a huge problem in Honduras. And we got the word that he was murdered right as church services were starting. And so a bunch of the members went, and what had happened, he was drowned. We didn't know he was murdered yet, but they just said he's under the water, no one can find him. And after a day and a half of searching, he was found. And in times like that, it's devastating, especially for your church family. Because Yul, he's our minister, and he's my right hand down there, and to watch his heart destroyed, to watch his mom, who's my best friend down there, to watch her go through the pain of losing her child. It's hard. If you've ever gone through that, you know what they're feeling. And we said, we can't bring him back. But we've got to do so. This can't be senseless. We've got to find a way to make sense out of this. And after we'd gone through the grieving process, Yul said, "You know what I want?" I said, "What?" He said, "When my son was under that water, there was no one to rescue him." And there wasn't. They don't have rescue boats that come and look, and everyone's walking around with sticks and trying to find him. He said, "I don't want anyone else to feel this pain. If someone else has a tragedy, I want a team of people that are trained. We may not be able to save everyone, but we can at least help and let them know that we care enough to put a group of people together and train them." Okay, I'm stuck again. So there's that group of people. The gringo, there on your third on the left, his name is Caleb. He's part of our health committee too. Linda knows him. And he's going into the military to get into pararescue, just some of that extreme rescue work. And he came down and he taught this group all kinds of stuff, how to rescue people from all different kinds of odd situations. And here they're teaching him knots, how to get people out of trees. We've had some people that have had really strange accidents up in trees. And that was one of the things they got to teach us, how to get people out of trees, for crying out loud. They get up there and get in so much trouble. So anyways, this was something that came out of a tragedy. It's not something we hope we never have to use again. We did have to use it once, and unfortunately, that was just recently, and the victim did not make it, but they did everything they could, and they knew they did. And that gave them satisfaction in knowing we did what we could, and that family was there to see there was someone there to help them. So, don't know in the long run, not all these people on this team are Christians, some are. And so we've already started working with them. And oddly enough, 2 on that team, where'd I go again? Oh, okay. So the guy in the orange shirt all the way on this end, and the guy with the plaid shirt, green, white plaid, are brothers, not members of the church. And when this group came down, they said, "We want to have them to our house. We want to feed them. We want to give them a meal." And, to see people starting to change, starting to want to be a part of something, starting to want to start serving others, that's the change we're looking for. So, we have I don't know where I'm at in this now. So anyways, there's a picture of our pharmacy. We're going to skip around a little bit, I guess. There's a picture of our pharmacy. We do have a clinic that was constructed by this team that Yul oversaw its construction. This year we were blessed to finally hire a doctor. And so there's someone there when I'm not there to take care of patients now all the time. And we have a fully running diabetes program down there that is run by the villagers now, and they're trained to do it, so that every month all the diabetes patients from all the villages around come and they get their blood tested and they get weighed and their blood pressure checked and checked for any complications, their blood sugar checked, they're given their medicines for the next month. It's a very common disease. Type 2 diabetes is very common because of their diet. And so a lot of these people were seeing complications that they should never have because they had no medicine. They just couldn't, and those that could get it couldn't afford it all the time, so they'd take it for a month and maybe go 3 or 4 months without it, and then take it again. It's a very inconsistent care, so we were able to train people and bring that care. This is our doctor in the blue there in the scrub top. That's Norman, and this is another picture of Yul Brynner today. This was just taken earlier this year. Oh, okay. So this is the congregation where they meet, and they're getting ready to expand. They first started meeting in a little home, and then they grew out of that, and then they got a classroom in a school, and they grew out of that, and then they started meeting in the front yard of one of the members, and then the rain kept getting them wet, and so they built a pavilion, and then they grew out of the pavilion, and then they made it bigger, and then the ladies kept complaining about the cattle that was using it for shelter at night. Could we put walls on it? And so this is where they're at now. Now they're just about out of it, and they're already talking about having to expand again. There's a congregation here, and you can see Yul is up there. They're singing, and they're having a worship service. This was just last week. So this is a pretty recent picture here. Proverbs 19:17 says, he who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward him for what he's done. We have taught very poor people to be kind to very poor people. That's what we do. And we've taught them that you might be poor, but you still have something you can give. There's still something that you have that you can give. Your time, your talent. And what's been amazing is to watch this church blossom. Now, our village leader's not a Christian. He's not even in the least bit interested at this point. But we had a village meeting recently, and he stood up in front of everyone in the village, and he said, if you want to know how to live for God, you just go to a church right down there. They know how to do it. That church knows how to do it. And everyone in this community has benefited probably in some way from how they serve. So we're real proud of how this church has grown, of how the nationals have taken it and embraced it. We're hoping that, we feel like if we do it right, someday we're going to walk away, and it's going to all be theirs. And right now, they've taken complete ownership of the congregation. When I'm down there, basically all I do is I teach the women's class to give our women's teacher, Shelley, a break. And then I'll meet with, like this time I met with some of the teachers and leaders to teach them how to use some new Bible resources that we have brought down that are in our library, just to give them an idea how to use them. But they're doing great. They're doing amazing. We're that close to the clinic running without any North American help. The biggest thing is funding, because it's a poor country, and funding is very difficult, and some things we don't know that we'll really walk away from it. But we want to at least get to where they're running the whole thing. That's our goal. And we're getting closer and closer and closer to that goal. So that's all I have to say. I really appreciate your attention today. Thank you so much to Michael. I appreciate you giving me your time. I appreciate this congregation. I don't know if all of you know it, I hope you know it, but this congregation supports us, and this is just an example of what you're doing, and I'm so appreciative for that. It's more than you can imagine. I wish you could imagine it, but hopefully I gave you just a little picture into the world that I'm working in down in Honduras.
One thing she didn't share with you is walking up those steep hills and those rocky crevices and stuff, it's wasted her knees. So she's getting double knee surgery. So let's agree that it goes well, and that she gets full use of her knees. David went through that.
She is actually going to the doctor that I did, but Laura,
Oh.
this is what you get.
So, Mr. Carlton, come forward, please. And then, leadership, David, use those knees. Come on up. Mr. Biggs. Hallelujah. Father, what has been used, Father, for your glory, this body, this mind, this spirit, Father. She's exhausted herself, Father, for your purposes. She has given what she has, and she's so shared with us. Because we all have something to give. Whether, like she said, time, treasure, talents, Father, we all have something we can give. And Father, so much of what this sister Laura's given, Father, is even, Father, reflected in the wear on her own body. So, Father, we are believing in Yeshua's name that, Lord, that first of all, that the procedure will go smoothly and as painless as godly possible. And, Father, we pray in Yeshua's name, Lord, the procedure would go well. And, Father, that she would get all the help and support she needs, Father, in her life, in her day-to-day life. Father, you will supply the need, and the need is great. We take so much for granted. I pray, Father, that we would become like them, Father, grateful for every gift that comes from you, and grateful for every provision that comes from you, that we use every moment, every opportunity to praise you and to, Father, show the heart of Messiah, the selfless heart of Messiah to others. Lord, that they would see in us something that they want,